You just don't have what it takes to handle actual responsibility, my ex told me flat out. Derek always knew how to take charge of a situation, and honestly, you just don't. She delivered this little speech with a straight face, acting like she just crawled out of some grueling late-night corporate meeting. Too bad for her. I'd already called her office, and they explicitly told me the building was completely empty. Instead of blowing up and calling her out right then and there, I decided to play it cool. I went ahead and made a single, quiet phone call. The very next morning, her cell started buzzing. The exact second she heard the voice on the other end of the line, her face went completely pale, and the phone slipped right out of her hand, clattering onto the floor without her uttering a single word. My name is Steve. I'm 35 years old, and up until about a month ago, I genuinely believed I was in a solid, committed relationship with a woman who actually respected me. As it turns out, I was really just the safe, dependable backup plan she kept around while her true priorities lay somewhere else entirely. But when the truth finally smacked me in the face, I didn't lose my cool, scream, or throw a tantrum. I just made one highly calculated phone call that completely dismantled the whole web of lies she'd been spinning behind my back. Monica and I had been together for 2.5 years. Our paths first crossed at a mutual friend's birthday bash, where we instantly hit it off over our shared obsession with hiking trails and incredibly awful reality television shows. From that night on, our relationship just naturally fell into place. She was sharp, incredibly driven, and climbed the ladder in corporate sales. Down the line, we started having serious talks about getting a place together, and maybe even putting a ring on her finger sometime next year. I was fully convinced we were laying down the foundation for a real future together. But then, around 3 months ago, the whole vibe shifted. Monica started pulling away from me, and it seemed like she couldn't stop finding faults in everything I did. Suddenly, she was dropping these passive-aggressive comments about how I lacked ambition and needed to be more dominant. See, I work in IT infrastructure. It's a rock-solid job with great pay, nothing flashy or dramatic, but it keeps the lights on and then some. Out of nowhere, she started measuring me against her ex-boyfriend, Derek, a guy she'd been with for 3 whole years before I came along. According to her, Derek was this absolute rockstar sales manager who ran the show wherever he went and always got results. In the beginning, the comparisons were pretty subtle. She'd say stuff like, well, Derek probably would have approached that problem differently. Or, Derek always knew exactly what to say to smooth things over. But as time went on, the digs got way sharper, happening almost daily, and they were flat out insulting. Everything finally boiled over 2 weeks ago on a Tuesday evening. Monica shot me a text around 5 in the afternoon, claiming she was stuck doing some late-night strategy meeting at the firm and wouldn't be back until around 9. Honestly, I didn't think twice about it because she usually had to stay late a couple of times a month. I told her it was no big deal. My initial plan was to grab some food with my buddy Ryan instead, but his kid ended up coming down with something, so he had to cancel on me at the last minute. Right then, I thought it'd be a great idea to surprise Monica. I figured I'd swing by her absolute favorite Thai spot, grab some takeout, and drop it off at her office around 7, so she'd have a hot meal waiting for her the second her meeting wrapped up. I pulled up to her office building right around 7:15, and the main lobby was practically a ghost town. There was just one security guard posted up at the front desk. So I walked over to sign in and explained I was just dropping off some dinner for Monica Chin upstairs in sales. The guy tapped a few keys on his computer, looked up at the monitor, and then gave me this funny look. Sorry man, but nobody from the sales team is in the building tonight. This place is pretty much locked down except for the night janitors and a couple of folks over in the accounting department. I blinked, totally thrown off. Are you positive? Monica Chen? She specifically told me she had a massive meeting tonight. He ran the schedule one more time just to be sure. Yeah, definitely no sales meetings on the books for tonight. The last person from that floor clocked out and left around 5:30. I thanked the guy, picked up the bag of food, and walked out. I went and sat in the front seat of my car in the dark parking lot, my mind racing as I tried to process what was actually happening. She had bald-faced lied to me about her whereabouts. The only real question left was what exactly she was trying to hide. I decided to ring her phone. It rang 3 times before she picked up, and right away, I could hear this loud ambient noise in the background. Clinking glasses, music playing, and people laughing, making it obvious she was sitting in a lively bar or restaurant. "Hey babe, what's going on?" she asked. I kept my voice totally casual. "Just checking in on you. How's that meeting treating you?" "Oh, it's fine. A total snooze fest, honestly. You know how these corporate things drag on. We should be wrapping things up in an hour or so, though." I bit my tongue. "All right, want me to pick up some food for you so it's ready when you get back?" "That's really sweet of you, but we actually ordered catering right to the conference room. I'll probably just grab a quick bite of something small when I get home. Honestly, don't stay up waiting for me if you're getting sleepy." And with that, we hung up. She had just looked me right in the virtual eye and lied straight to my face. And it wasn't even a clever cover-up, either. There wasn't a single doubt in my mind that she wasn't anywhere near a business meeting. What would you do if you caught your partner in a flat-out lie like that? Would you confront them right then? Or wait to see how deep the rabbit hole goes? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, I drove back to the house, threw the Thai food straight into the refrigerator, and just sat there on the couch in the quiet, trying to wrap my head around the whole mess. Around 9:30, the headlights of Monica's car cut through the driveway. She walked through the front door looking totally relaxed, almost unusually bubbly. Ugh, that meeting dragged on forever. I am wiped out. She kicked off her high heels right by the door and started walking toward the bedroom. "How did it go?" I called out after her. "Just tedious," she sighed. "We spent the whole time dissecting quarterly projections and mapping out new strategies. You know how exhausting Mike gets when he gets into that hyper-focus planning mode." Mike was her direct supervisor, meaning she was just layering on even more fabrications. I chose not to call her out that night. Before I made my move, I wanted to gather all my facts first. The following morning, which was Wednesday, I resorted to doing something I'm certainly not proud of, but looking back, I don't regret it for a second. I dialed her office line and asked to speak directly with her personal assistant, Kelly. "Hey Kelly, it's Steve, Monica's boyfriend. Look, I'm trying to set up this really cool surprise for her, but I need to secretly coordinate it around her work calendar. Do you happen to know if she has any late-night meetings locked in for the rest of the week?" Kelly was incredibly upbeat and happy to help out. "Oh, that is so incredibly thoughtful of you. Let me pull up her calendar real quick." Actually, her schedule looks pretty wide open for the rest of the week. Just the standard 9 to 5 routine. I know she had to stay late last Friday, but there's absolutely nothing on the books for this week. I cleared my throat. "What about yesterday? Tuesday night?" "Tuesday? No, not at all. She walked out of here right at her usual time, right around 5:15 if I remember correctly." "Got it. Thanks a ton, Kelly, appreciate it." So there it was. Monica had fabricated the entire story about Tuesday, and by the sound of it, she'd been using the late meeting excuse plenty of times before. Now, I absolutely had to figure out where she was actually spending those evenings. Later that day, I tried to play it cool and asked her casually, "Hey, do you have any more of those late-night meetings coming up anytime soon?" "Actually, yeah, tomorrow night," she answered without missing a beat. "I probably won't walk through the door until 9:30 or 10 o'clock. I just nodded. "All right, sounds good. I'll just fend for myself for dinner then." Thursday night rolled around. Monica walked out the door at 5:45, looking pristine and dressed up, tossing out a quick promise to text me the second her meeting was winding down. By 6:15, I took a step that confirmed my absolute worst fears. I opened up the Find My Friends app on my phone. We had both enabled location sharing months ago just for basic safety and convenience, and I hadn't even thought about checking it since. She wasn't anywhere near her office building. The map showed her sitting at a high-end steakhouse right in the heart of downtown. I grabbed my keys, jumped into my truck, and made the drive out there, pulling into a parking spot right across the street where I had a clear line of sight to the main entrance. Right at 7:20, Monica stepped out onto the sidewalk. And she definitely wasn't solo. Standing right next to her was this guy. Tall, sharp-dressed, carrying himself with total confidence. They lingered outside the doors, chatting intimately for a couple of minutes. At one point, he reached out and brushed her arm, and she broke into a huge laugh at something he said. Then they leaned in for a lingering goodbye hug, and she turned to walk back to her car. I didn't recognize his face from any social media photos, but deep down in my gut, I knew exactly who he was. I made sure to speed back to the house well before she could get there, and I was sitting quietly on the living room sofa the moment she stepped inside at 8:30. Did the meeting wrap up early tonight? I inquired. Yeah, we managed to just power through the agenda, she lied seamlessly. Honestly, though, I am completely starving. I think I'm going to go whip up a quick sandwich in the kitchen. I sat there watching her drift around the kitchen counters, spinning these falsehoods with absolute ease, and this cold, heavy feeling just settled deep inside my chest. Hey Monica, can I ask you a real question? Sure. What's on your mind? Do you honestly think I'm good at handling responsibility? She froze in place, turning around to look at me with genuine bewilderment. Well, that's completely random. Where is this coming from? I don't know. I guess I'm just curious to get your honest perspective. She leaned back against the kitchen counter, crossing her arms. You want the truth? Look, I think you're perfectly fine when it comes to managing basic day-to-day chores, but you really aren't built for high-pressure scenarios. You constantly go out of your way to avoid conflict. You never step up and take the lead on anything. To be completely honest, Steve, you'd never survive a situation that required real, heavy responsibility. What exact kind of responsibility are we talking about here? I challenged quietly. I don't know, she shrugged. The kind of situations where the stakes are incredibly high, or where you actually have to show true leadership. Take my ex, Derek, for example. That man knew exactly how to manage the kind of weight you just can't. He just had this undeniable presence, this effortless confidence about him. You guys are just entirely different people, she added, driving the point home. And right there it was again. Yet another unsolicited lecture on how I couldn't measure up to the great Derek. I just nodded my head slowly, letting the silence hang in the air for a second. Where exactly were you tonight, Monica? The second those words left my mouth, her expression completely shifted. I already told you, Steve, she said, her voice dropping an octave. I was stuck in that late meeting. I looked right at her. Well, that's funny, because I talked to Kelly, and she explicitly told me there wasn't a single meeting on the schedule today. Monica didn't even blink. Kelly doesn't know every single detail about what goes on in that office. Maybe not, I replied, keeping my voice dead calm. But I also checked your location on my phone. You weren't at the office, Monica. You were sitting over at the Blackstone Steakhouse. In fact, I actually drove down there myself, stood across the street, and watched you walk out the front door with him. Right then, every last bit of color completely drained from her face. Steve, she stammered. I cut her off. Is it Derek? She just stared at me, completely frozen, and honestly, that dead silence told me everything I needed to know. How long has this been going on? I demanded. She immediately went into damage control. Look, it's not what you think it is, okay? I asked you a question, Monica. How long have you been sneaking around behind my back to see him? We aren't doing anything. We've just been talking. We're rekindling our old friendship. That's all. It's really nothing serious, I swear. I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. Nothing serious? You've been bald-faced lying to my face for weeks on end about where you're going. You're out having intimate dinners with your ex-boyfriend while constantly telling me to my face how much better of a man he is than me. That sounds pretty damn serious to me. She actually had the nerve to look frustrated. Don't you think you're kind of overreacting here? I'm completely done, Monica. Start packing your things. She opened her mouth to speak, but I shut it down. Go ahead and crash at Derek's place tonight, since you clearly prefer being around him anyway. Right on cue, the waterworks started. She began sobbing, desperately trying to scramble for excuses, insisting it wasn't an actual affair and that they were strictly platonic friends. She claimed she was just feeling confused about life and needed a little bit of time to sort through her emotions. I didn't even bother arguing or yelling back. I walked right past her into the master bedroom, threw a bunch of my clothes into a duffel bag, and told her flat out that I was going to crash on Ryan's couch. I gave her until the end of the weekend to get all her junk out of my space. Here's the first major update on how things went down. I ended up staying over at Ryan's place for 3 whole days. During that entire stretch, my phone was absolutely blowing up with texts from Monica. She was nonstop apologizing, trying to rationalize her behavior, and practically begging on her knees for a second chance. She finally owned up to the fact that she'd been secretly meeting up with Derek for about 6 weeks. Apparently, they ran into each other at some corporate industry conference and reconnected. She swore up and down on everything she owned that it never turned physical, claiming they were just talking and catching up on old times. She told me she had been feeling insecure about where our relationship was heading, but this whole blowout made her realize I was the only one she truly wanted to be with. But I wasn't buying a single word of it. Even if they never actually slept together, which, let's be honest, is highly debatable, the emotional betrayal alone was more than enough to cross the line. The constant stream of lies was enough. The fact that she routinely humiliated me by comparing me to him was the final nail in the coffin. By the time Sunday rolled around, I decided to make my move. I spent a little time doing some digital digging, tracked down Derek's official LinkedIn profile, figured out what firm he worked for, and managed to snag his direct corporate email address right off their company site. I sat down and fired off a very specific message to him. Derek, you have no idea who I am, but I'm Monica Chen's boyfriend. Or at least, I was up until the moment I discovered she's been secretly meeting up with you for dinners while fabricating stories to cover her tracks. I'm completely out of the picture now. She's all yours. But before I walk away, I figured there are a few things you ought to know. For the past few months, Monica has done nothing but lecture me on how much more of a man you are compared to me. She constantly raved about how you knew how to handle heavy responsibility, and how you carry this incredible confidence and presence that I completely lack. She's been building you up in our home like some kind of flawless god while systematically tearing my self-esteem to shreds. I just thought it was only fair that you know exactly what kind of person you're dealing with here. Oh, and by the way, she's also been telling everyone at her workplace that you're just some old platonic friend she's doing some professional networking with. Do with that information what you will. Best of luck. I took a deep breath and clicked send. I didn't breathe a word about this email to Monica, and I didn't mention it to a soul except for Ryan. He looked at me and said it was either a stroke of absolute genius or complete psychological warfare, and honestly, he wasn't entirely sure which side of the fence I landed on. First thing Monday morning, I finally moved back into my own place. Monica had cleared out all her belongings over the weekend and moved into a spare room at her girlfriend's apartment. I was standing in the kitchen brewing a fresh pot of coffee around 8:30 in the morning when my cell phone started buzzing in my hand. It was a completely blocked, unknown number. I slid it open. Hello, is this Steve? A man's voice asked on the other end. He sounded incredibly professional, totally composed, and completely in control. Yeah, this is him, I replied. Who's asking? There was a brief pause. This is Derek Morrison. I just read through the email you sent me. I gripped the phone a little tighter. All right, I'm listening. Look, Steve. There are some things you and I need to discuss right now. Look, Steve, Monica has been lying straight to both of our faces, he said, and that instantly hooked my attention. What do you mean by that? I asked, completely blindsided. She flat out told me that you two split up over 3 months ago, Derek explained. She claimed she was completely single and that the two of us were just taking things slow while she processed the end of that relationship. Man, I had absolutely no clue you guys were still living together and dating. The minute I finished reading your email, I dialed her number immediately. At first, she tried to convince me you were just spinning lies. She tried to frame you as some crazy, bitter ex-boyfriend who was actively harassing her. So, I told her to send over some hard proof. I asked to see recent text threads between you two, basically anything to back up her claim that you guys were officially done. And how did that go? I asked. She couldn't do it, Derek sighed. Because the truth is, you guys were very much still together. She's been playing both of us for fools this entire time. She was telling me you were ancient history, while turning around and telling you that I was just a harmless platonic friend. Neither one of us was getting the actual story. I had to take a seat on the kitchen stool. So where do we go from here? As far as I'm concerned, I am completely done with her, Derek said without a hint of hesitation. I have zero interest in keeping someone in my life who can look me in the eye and lie that effortlessly. I mainly called because I wanted to clue you in on what really went down, and to honestly apologize. I genuinely had no idea I was playing a part in cheating on someone. I appreciate you telling me, I muttered, respecting the guy's directness. And Steve, for whatever it's worth, she painted a really nasty picture of you to make herself look like the innocent victim of a toxic relationship. And look, I swallowed it hook, line, and sinker because I had no reason to doubt her. But if even a tiny fraction of the things she claimed were true, you still deserve a hell of a lot better than the way she treated you. Nobody should ever be manipulated and lied to like this. With that, we both said our piece and hung up the phone. I just sat there in the quiet kitchen, letting the sheer weight of it all sink in. Monica hadn't just stepped out on me for an emotional fling. She had completely fabricated two entirely different realities for us. She was using me as a reliable safety net while building up Derek's ego, all while convincing him that I didn't even exist anymore. Here's the next update on how this whole train wreck unfolded. Right around 9:15 that same Monday morning, Derek must have officially delivered the fatal blow to Monica's side project. Because by 9:17, my cell phone started vibrating itself off the kitchen counter. I'm talking 17 missed calls from Monica in a span of literally 3 minutes. Then came the frantic barrage of text messages. What the hell did you do? Derek just called me out of nowhere. He's telling me we're completely finished. What did you tell him, Steve? I didn't type back a single letter. I figured it was best to just leave her spinning in her own panic for a bit. Sure enough, around 10 o'clock, she showed up on my doorstep. Thankfully, I had the foresight to change the deadbolts over the weekend, so her key was completely useless. She started pounding on the wood like a maniac. I cracked the door open just an inch, making sure the heavy safety chain was securely locked in place. What do you want? I asked coldly. What exactly did you say to Derek? She hissed, her eyes glaring at me. I told him the absolute truth, I replied calmly. That you've been running a double life and lying to both of us. You had absolutely no right to interfere in my business, she screamed. I had every single right in the world, I shot back. You've been playing me for a fool for weeks on end. The guy deserved to know exactly what kind of person he was getting involved with. He broke up with me. Steve, are you happy now? She sobbed, throwing her hands in the air. You completely ruined my entire life. I didn't ruin a single thing for you, Monica. You managed to do that all on your own the exact second you made the conscious choice to look everyone who loves you in the eye and lie to them. This is on you. This is completely psycho, she yelled back. You're just being a vindictive, controlling piece of... Monica, I am completely done listening to you flip the script and blame everyone else for your own garbage actions. I interrupted, cutting her off cleanly. You made your bed, and now you have to lie in it. Derek made his choice, and now I'm firmly making mine. We are entirely over. Do not ever attempt to contact me again. I pulled the door shut and flipped the lock. She stayed out on the landing for a few more minutes, screaming insults through the wood before her footsteps finally faded down the hallway. Over the course of the next week, the real scope of her deception started bubbling up through our circle of mutual friends. It turns out Monica had been tailoring a completely different narrative for every single person in her life. Her office coworkers were under the impression that Derek was just some high-level professional mentor guiding her career. Her personal friends had been fed this story that I was incredibly boring and checking out of the relationship, and that she was actively planning to leave me. Meanwhile, her own parents and family thought everything was completely perfect between us. She had been meticulously editing the script of her life so that nobody could ever piece the puzzle together, until the entire house of cards collapsed. The moment Derek walked away from her, combined with me confirming to our friends that her late-night work meetings were complete fiction, her social reputation took an absolute nosedive. The people she had manipulated were furious. Her work connections felt completely used, and her family was thoroughly let down by her behavior. Monica did try to wiggle her way back into my life a few more times as the weeks crawled by. First, it was a wave of deeply apologetic, crying texts. Then, she started using our mutual friends as messengers, dropping hints about how I should show some grace and give her one more shot. Eventually, she sent this massive, multi-page email, trying to rationalize everything by saying she was going through a personal identity crisis and made some terrible errors in judgment, but swore she was still deeply in love with me. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a response. When you spend 2.5 years of your life with a person who uses her ex to make you feel inferior, lies about her whereabouts, and tries to lock down her next relationship while keeping you on the hook as a fallback plan, that isn't love. That's just pure selfishness. What do you think about this whole situation? Do you think I handled it the right way by stepping back and letting her face the music? Or would you have handled the confrontation differently? Hit the comment section and let me know your thoughts. Anyway, Derek actually reached out to me one last time about 3 weeks after the initial explosion. He had caught wind through some of Monica's office colleagues that she was running around telling people he had aggressively pursued her and simply refused to take no for an answer. He wanted to reach out man-to-man to ensure I knew the real story, that she was the one who initiated the contact, and she was the one constantly pursuing him. I told him straight up that I believed his version of events and genuinely appreciated him looking out. Look, it's not like the guy and I are going to grab beers or become best friends, but there's a strange level of mutual respect between us now. At the end of the day, we were just two regular guys who got completely played by the exact same master manipulator. Honestly, the strangest realization out of this whole ordeal was finding out just how many people around us had noticed her toxic behavior but chose to stay completely silent. Once the breakup became official, a handful of my buddies confessed they always felt she was way too critical of me, constantly focusing on my perceived flaws instead of appreciating what I brought to the table. They told me they chose to keep their mouths shut because they didn't want to overstep bounds or cause drama in my relationship. Look, I get where they were coming from, but it really drove home the point that I need to keep people in my inner circle who aren't afraid to pull me aside and tell me the brutal truth when I genuinely need to hear it. Here is the final update on where everything stands now. It's officially been 2 months since I pressed send on that fateful email to Derek, and honestly, I am doing fantastic. The atmosphere in my apartment feels 10 times lighter without her constant, hovering judgment over every little thing I do. I've finally started pouring my time back into the personal hobbies I completely neglected while trying to please her. I got back into rock climbing at the local gym, signed up for a recreational soccer league, and I've been tearing through a stack of books I've wanted to read for ages. As for Monica, she packed up and moved to an entirely different city about 3 weeks back. Apparently, she managed to secure a job transfer within her company. It seems she desperately needed a completely fresh start away from the massive social fallout she created around here. I only know this because a few mutual friends still insist on feeding me updates, even though I've explicitly asked them to stop talking about her. For some reason, people assume you're dying to know every detail about your ex's downfall. Honestly, I don't care to know, but I don't actively fight them on it when they bring it up either. The last bit of gossip I heard is that she's been posting all over her social media profiles about recovering from toxic exes and learning how to heal her trust issues. Trust me, the sheer irony of those posts isn't lost on a single person who actually knows the real story. Derek and I actually ran into each other at a professional networking event just last week. We caught each other's eye across the room, gave a respectful nod, exchanged a quick, casual, "Hey man, how's it going?" and just kept on walking. No lingering awkwardness, no bad blood. Just two ordinary guys who happened to get caught up in another person's chaotic web of lies. The main thought that keeps looping in my head is that initial phone call Derek made to her that Monday morning. I can't help but picture the absolute panic Monica must have felt the exact second she realized both of her worlds had completely collided. That moment of clarity when she realized the separate, elaborate fairy tales she had spun for both of her relationships had turned to dust in a single morning. Notice that I never went out of my way to expose her to the public. I didn't blast her name all over social media, and I didn't go around telling every single acquaintance we shared. All I did was make one precise, logical call and fire off a single email to a guy who had a right to know he was being deceived. That was all it took for the entire illusion to shatter on its own. Sometimes, true justice doesn't require some massive, dramatic scene. It's about simply pulling back the curtain on the truth and letting the chips fall exactly where they may. To answer a question that keeps popping up, no, I don't regret sending that email to Derek for a single second. The guy absolutely deserved to know he was being fed a pack of lies, just like I deserved to know the truth about my own relationship. Monica is the sole creator of this entire mess by choosing to manipulate two people simultaneously. I simply made sure that both men involved finally had the accurate facts to make their own decisions. For everyone asking about that specific moment she dropped her cell phone, Derek actually filled me in on the details later on. He told me that when he rang her up that morning, she answered the phone with this incredibly cheerful, bubbly voice, assuming it was just a regular, sweet phone call from him. The absolute second the words, "Hey, I just received a very interesting email from your boyfriend, Steve," left his mouth, she went completely dead silent. A split second later, the call dropped entirely. He originally assumed she had just hung up on him in a panic, but our mutual friends later confirmed that she literally dropped her phone flat on the floor in absolute shock. She tried calling him back about 2 minutes later to spin some frantic explanation, but by that point, Derek was already completely done listening to her stories. And finally, to clarify the legal side of things for those asking, yes, changing the apartment locks was entirely legal on my end. Monica had already completely packed her bags and voluntarily vacated the property, and her name was never on the official lease agreement to begin with. I still made sure to give her ample time to come by and grab the remainder of her smaller belongings, and I gave her proper advance notice so everything was handled completely by the book.